there are people that can really release through verbalizing and intellectualizing, and sharing their emotion. But there's also a group of people that talking about and intellectualizing and analyzing is not going to feel like much of a release. It's sort of a very cognitive process that keeps us in our heads. And for some of us, going down into our bodies and really being able to feel the experience of what's going on is actually going to help us move through a wave of emotion.
Welcome to This Way Up, the podcast dedicated to supporting parents and caregivers navigating the complex world of mental health. I'm Andrea, and each episode we dive deep into the conversations that matter, exploring the challenges, triumphs, and transformative journeys of those facing mental health struggles within their families. Whether you're here for expert advice, inspiring stories, or just a little boost to get you through the day, we've got you covered. So grab a cup of coffee, kick back, and join us as we find the bright spots in the mental health journey, because we're all climbing our way up together.
Have you ever felt those butterflies in your stomach, or as my son would say, big elephants jumping on his tummy? You know, those heavy, fluttery, uncomfortable feelings we get when we're about ready to do something scary or hard or important. Most of us know it well, but we don't actually know what to do with it. Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Jen Rapkin, who is the author of The Feeling Muscle, to talk about what she calls felt emotions, those emotions that live in our body, not just in our head. We will explore how those sensations show up, what they're trying to tell us, and how to actually stay with them instead of pushing them aside. She also shares with us some practical ways to tune into those emotions that we carry physically. If you've ever tried to think your way out of a feeling and failed, this episode might be for you. Please, if you enjoy the episode, like and share with all of your friends. Well, thank you for joining me, Jen. I am very interested to get a deeper look into your book that you wrote and the concept of felt emotion. I would love for you to walk through a little bit about what the premise of the book is.
Absolutely. And Andrea, thank you so much for having me. My book is called The Feeling Muscle: How Felt Emotion Can Help You Sit With and Outlast Hard Feelings. And the premise of the book is really to look at emotions through the lens of the body. And so what is our body's experience of emotion? So felt emotion is our butterflies of anxiety in our stomach. It's our head is going to explode rage, our warmth of contentment that spreads throughout the body. It is the physical experience of our emotions. And my goal in the book is to both inform people about felt emotion, which even though it's something that we experience on a day-to-day basis, it's not really something that we talk about. It's not part of our conversation. It's not part of mainstream consciousness. So I want to bring that to the table. I want to help people gain a vocabulary for their inner experience, their body's experience, and then also to use felt emotion to help us sit with hard feelings and get through them rather than choosing behaviors that distract and numb and avoid the feelings.
Well, it's interesting when I was reading the book and thinking about the concept of felt emotion, I could absolutely relate to the butterflies in the stomach and those ones that were more apparent or more visceral.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to thinking, there's a lot of times that I've got feelings that are triggered because of emotion that I might attribute to being normal, or I might just dismiss.
So for sure. And I think that part of this book is to just help us recognize that our body speaks to us. And sometimes we have time to stop and listen and pay attention to that. And other times we can't. And that's totally normal. We don't, if we stopped and paid attention to every little feeling that we got in our body, we'd be very unproductive and get nothing done. But when we can stop and listen to our body speaking to us, we create a relationship with our bodies that is more friendly, right? And more open to experiencing our humanness.
You talk briefly about the difference between feelings and emotions,
Mhm.
and you kind of combine the two together, but I don't think you're talking about feelings necessarily.
Right. That's a really good point because emotions are obviously, we know we have emotions. We have love and joy and sadness and fear and grief and shame and rejection. But feelings, we can feel many, many things other than emotions, right? So we feel objects, we feel temperatures, we feel wind through our hair, we feel the intimacy of relationships. So, and we feel illness and biochemical imbalance. And so that distinction is necessary. I use the words interchangeably, but I wanted to be clear in the book that when I talk about feelings, I'm talking about the physical experience of emotion in the body.
When my son was first going through some issues when he was about 11, the doctor had asked him, "So do you feel like you have butterflies in your stomach?" And he said, "No, I feel like I have elephants stomping on my stomach." And I thought it was such a good visual of maybe what is a normal feeling
Mhm.
of butterflies in your stomach and of anxiety or nervousness, and then where something has kind of tipped the scales where it's a little more challenging than your standard butterflies in the stomach.
Yeah, and that's also really important, and I talk about it in the book, is that if we can begin to be familiar with our, I call them our usual suspects, right? So like our feelings of anxiety, our feelings of fear, our feelings of frustration, if we can be comfortable with that and familiar and get to know those feelings, then we're actually going to be able to feel and understand when a new feeling or a new sensation might require a call to the doctor or a deeper look, a deeper exploration.
So, what's your background and how did you get here?
Yeah. Well, I'll because I know your audience. I would love to talk about sort of my journey
Sure.
through.
Yeah.
Yes, I began, and as a young person, I was born as a very big feeler, right? So I was somebody that felt emotions really strongly in my body. And my parents, while they were immensely loving, and caring parents, they had an interesting outlook where they believed that young people, young kids, should not be exposed to hard topics, to hard conversations, to hard feelings. And so they didn't model, having difficult conversations in front of me, and they didn't talk about having hard feelings. And as a result, I grew up kind of not really knowing how to manage all of this that was inside me. And at the same time, I also have OCD. I've had OCD my whole life. And so I grew up as an adolescent and young adult, I was desperate to figure out sort of who I was apart from all of the mental noise and the intrusive thoughts that were going through my mind. And so it was almost as if my body was speaking to me, and saying, listen to, I'm here, I have something to say, pay attention to me. And so I spent much of my adult life and my professional life as a naturopath quieting the mind and listening to what the body has to say. And sort of that has been my path to finding more ease in my psyche, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. You talk about, well, actually, it's probably you had mentioned that your parents didn't really want to talk about hard things. I think that might have been a generational thing.
Yeah.
Although my husband's, they have no problem talking about hard feelings or hard topics at all. But I know at least in our side, we didn't either. So we probably got into a habit maybe of ignoring are those feelings because when we had them, they were just dismissed as a child. Like we just don't work through that. So then they become, as we get older, very, very uncomfortable. And you talk about, doing things to suppress those or to ignore them. Can you bring some examples of what we might do
Yeah.
to ignore those?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the book, I break it down into four different categories of how we avoid our feelings. Some may be more familiar to folks than others. But so the first one I think is fairly straightforward is numbing, right? So we
Mhm.
can numb ourselves. We can do that with food. We can do it with alcohol, with prescription recreational drugs. And the next is distraction, right? Distracting ourselves from feelings. Another common and understandable behavior that we do. And you think about it, Andrea, when you and I get off of this podcast, we're going to go to our phones and we might turn them on and we're going to be buzzed at and beeped at and, with so many notifications. And if you just think about what we have just at our fingertips to distract us from feelings. If something bubbles up that I don't want to feel, in a heartbeat, I can pick up my phone, I could play a word game, I could check social media, I could do some online shopping, I could do work and do some emails. So those are ways that we distract. Sometimes just habitually and mindlessly. We're not even conscious of those. And then the two sort of lesser familiar ways that we avoid and push down feeling. One is what I call body armor, and it's our body's way of pushing down feeling. So some of us will hold our breath when something comes up or we're having some anxiety or some fear, and holding our breath is a way that we push down feeling in our body. Some of us may have tension in our jaw, in our neck and throat, our shoulders, our hands, our abdomen. So there's lots of ways that we can hold and push down feeling and create a protective stance or create body armor. And then the last way, the last category is called retreating. I call it retreating, and it's something that I know a lot about because as an introvert, I could go and spend time as a teenager in my room, as a young adult in my apartment, and just retreat from the world. If I don't want to feel messy, complicated feelings, if I don't want to have messy, complicated friendships or relationships, I just retreat into myself and into my own world. And that's a way that we protect ourselves from hard feelings. But if we think about it, it's also a way that we cut ourselves off from living a full and connected life.
So a lot of us would do many of these things very unconsciously,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And not, I don't think even recognize that we were trying to suppress a feeling or not feel that feeling. What are some things people can do to recognize that, especially like with retreating? I'm thinking about my whole family. I'm the only extrovert in our family.
Mhm.
And so, they'll be like, my social battery's dead, or they will retreat. And I'm in my mind, I'm thinking that's a way of self-healing. That's a way that they need to recharge, et cetera, et cetera. What are some things people can do to recognize that maybe it's not just self-charging or recharging, it's actually a form of trying not to feel something?
Yeah, I love this question or in this bit of insight that you just shared because it's super important. Because I am not talking about retreating or taking time that we need to recharge and to refuel and your me time, right? Like that
Right.
is so important. So I'm so glad you brought that up. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is over and over and over again, if we notice that we maybe get an invitation to go meet somebody new, or maybe there's an opportunity to do something or to take a risk or an adventure or a trip, if we notice with our awareness and bringing attention to our life, living it in a more mindful way, if we realize that a lot of times we're kind of pulling back from those opportunities or those possibilities, and we're spending a lot of time sort of on our own or away from those connections, then that's a clue. And to do that with, or to notice that with neutrality or compassion and kindness, as opposed to judgment and criticism. The one thing I hope that I don't come off in this podcast as like I'm wagging my finger at anybody.
Sure.
I'm not. I have enormous compassion and empathy for the predicament that we find ourselves in this modern world of avoiding
Yeah.
hard feelings. Yeah.
Well, I think our world in general is designed to keep us away from feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about the phone, but just there's information hitting us at everywhere you look. I mean, you can't not be completely inundated with a distraction or with a way to suppress things. I mean, you just can't.
Yeah.
And that leads so many of us to just moving through and not even recognizing that maybe things are building up and we're not addressing some of the bigger things that are going on in our life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
If you, yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if you think back at, we talked a little bit about childhood. If
Mm-hmm.
we think of the messages, the societal messages that are sort of thrown at us from little people on, like, boys don't cry, grin and bear it, grow thicker skin, pull yourself together, push, just get through it. There's lots of messages that we're getting that reinforce what you're talking about, so that not only is our world kind of created to avoid and escape these feelings, but we're getting those messages.
So interesting though, because at the same time, therapy, I think, has become, everybody's, right hand man, right? And we're all learning about how to talk through our emotions and talk through our feelings and talk about things. But you talk about how just verbalizing them isn't, it helps, but it's not necessarily releasing it as much
Right.
as identifying it in the body. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think somebody, for sure, there are people that can really release through verbalizing and intellectualizing, and sharing their emotion. But there's also a group of people that talking about and intellectualizing and analyzing is not going to feel like much of a release. It's sort of a very cognitive process that keeps us in our heads. And for some of us, going down into our bodies and really being able to feel the experience of what's going on is actually going to help us move through a wave of emotion and feeling, and can actually be like so I talk about the concept of sitting with discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
and how important that is in certain therapies, like for OCD, exposure and response prevention, ERP. We have to sit with the discomfort, right? And so for some folks, that is a very what's abstract, like difficult to grasp concept. What do you mean sitting with my discomfort, sitting with my anxiety? For some of us, if we go down in our body and we feel that, that's like tangible. That
Mm-hmm.
gives us sort of something to hang our hat on and say, oh, so that's what I'm going to sit with. I'm going to sit with this discomfort in my sternum, or I'm going to sit with this discomfort in my throat, or I'm going to sit with this discomfort in my belly. And let me see if I can sit with it until it passes.
So, does not everybody hold it in their body?
So, that's a big question. And I believe, as somebody who's a body worker and
Mm-hmm.
you know studies body-centered therapies, I do believe that everybody holds feelings and emotions in their body. But there's going to be people that say, no, I don't feel anything in my body. And I really honor that. I really don't want people to feel like, I'm prying, something out of them. The way that I work with somebody, for example, who comes to see me for body work, who's curious about it, but says, I don't really feel much in my body, right? Like, I don't know, but I'm just curious. Let me just give this a try. Usually where I start is after a body scan, which is just bringing somebody into their body and tensing and releasing the parts of their body from head to toe, is I'll put my hands on their shoulders. That's usually where I start. And I ask them, can you feel my hands? Because for somebody who doesn't feel much in their body, they're more apt to feel something on top of their body. And so they'll say, "Oh, okay, yeah, like I can feel your hands and I might move it around, I might change my pressure a little bit." And they can feel that. And then my next question, a few minutes down the road, would be, "Can you feel yourself under my hands?" And there's something about that invitation to feel a little bit deeper that can help folks feel. And then if we're still struggling, which is again totally valid, oftentimes I will use my hands and use my touch, and I'll actually tell somebody, this is what I'm feeling on your, diaphragm, for example. I'll tell somebody, I feel a lot of tension here. And my words also might give them permission to then feel something within themselves. Sometimes I'll get somebody say, "Oh yeah, yeah, and I feel that too." Um, so that's a long-winded answer to your
No.
question.
I think it's a good one though, because it ties to me. Some of that also ties back into this being distracted
Mhm,
and suppressing, and how mindfulness plays. I try and I don't succeed very well in
mhm,
trying this mindfulness piece of it. And I know that that is a big, at least of the stuff that I have done, is trying to, okay, can you feel your feet? Can you feel the ground under your feet? Can you feel it's all this process, and it takes a moment to be able, at least for me, to be able to get there and actually start feeling what, the simple things, like you said, like a sheet touching my foot.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and what's really cool about it is that it is in the context of mindfulness. This is all an exploration of our present moment and what our present moment is for anybody in any given moment. And so another piece that might be helpful in thinking about all this is when somebody comes into my office, I don't want them to think that our goal is to relax and to just get to this place. Some people have a concept that I should get to some enlightened moment or Zen
Sure. Yeah.
space or relax, right? I throw that out the window, and I'll tell people that what I want to work with on the table and in your body is what's going on for you in this moment. And that's an invitation. If somebody comes into my office anxious, maybe they come in like, feeling really awesome. Like that's what we work with. We work with the moment. What's going on for you? And we explore and sort of open to the possibility of whatever you're feeling is your present moment, and let's explore what that's like. And I think that's helpful for folks like what you're saying who, struggle a little bit with
Hmm.
that, because it opens the door to this possibility of anything you're feeling in this moment is perfect, right? Like it's just as it should be. And let's just explore that.
Well, it kind of ties back to this whole piece where we were talking about, if people are coming in and they're wanting to feel relaxed, or they're wanting it, that might be a way of also numbing, or not, or not allowing yourself to feel the emotions behind that, if they can just, relax their muscles or whatever. Earlier, you had mentioned outlasting the feelings.
Mhm.
Um, can you talk about that? Like, I know if I've got butterflies or elephants on my stomach, That's the last thing I want to be doing, is outlasting that. I want to find a way to get it. But can you talk about the importance of outlasting and maybe some things people can do to get themselves through that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know where to start. Maybe the first place to start is to ask the question, or to answer the question that you just sort of asked, which is, why do it? So
Mm-hmm.
why feel hard feelings? Why try to outlast hard feelings? So just to talk about that for a moment, if we think about, as we talked a little bit about it before, is that if we avoid our feelings, the behaviors that we engage in to avoid, distract, and numb are not behaviors that move us toward our present moment. They don't move us toward ourselves. They don't move us toward our best selves, usually. And so when we feel and outlast feelings, we're actually staying with ourselves, moving toward ourselves rather than away from ourselves. But in addition to that, hard emotions can hold us hostage. And what I mean by that is, we talked a little bit about this before, is that if we don't believe that we can make it through feelings like shame and embarrassment and failure and insecurity and inadequacy and rejection, then we're not necessarily going to go and, do lots of new things and jump into our lives and take risks. So when we know and trust that we can outlast hard feelings, we live life in a different way. We live life a little more open to trying new things and to making mistakes and to failing. And then one more step quickly is that our emotions can hold other people in our lives hostage, right? So when we stuff and sit on and squash emotion within us, it runs the risk of bubbling up on the people that we love, right? It can come out unexpectedly, it can come out powerfully and forcefully, and that's not fair. If we don't want to feel our yucky, hard emotions, why would anybody else, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
fair to throw that out in the world. So another reason why we do the work of sitting and outlasting hard feelings is so that we let our feelings move through us and have a life and breathe so that they don't get stuck within us.
So that's why.
Yeah. And yeah, you have another part of your question is how.
How? Yeah.
Yeah, is how, right. So what I like to say to people, what I like to work on first is to start taking in two things. One is, can you stop and pause the next time somebody gives you a compliment, right? Or something really cool or awesome happens in your life? Can you stop and pause and just see what that feels like in your body? Now, some people are going to say, no, I don't feel anything. It's fine. But some of you may, and some of you might be able to take in that moment and be like, oh gosh, like, yeah, that feels really good. And let's not move on to the next moment. Can we feel what that feels like in the body just for a minute, right? That starts the process of the idea of welcoming in a feeling and letting it stay within us, almost as if we're shaking the hand to a feeling. Okay, I like that image.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take a moment, feel that compliment, see if it's generating some kind of experience in you, and shake its hand? That's a place to start. It's less threatening than hard feelings, and it begins the process of, what does this feel like in my body, and can I stay with it for a little while? And then the next step to the how is, can you stop, if you have time, with an everyday frustration? Something that doesn't feel as threatening as a big feeling of anxiety or spiraling fear, but
Mm-hmm.
a frustration. Something happened that didn't work out, and can I just sit with that and just, again, this may sound crazy, but can I shake its hand? Like, can I welcome that frustration in? Does everything is right? Like, whether you feel that feeling in your ear, in your heel, in your belly, maybe you don't feel it, but you're willing to stop for a minute and just shake its hand, whatever that means, even in the abstract. Again, that is a place to start. And when we can start feeling some kind of a tangible experience in our body, then we have something that we can stay with, that we can feel, and
Right.
see if we can allow its wave like motion to maybe it crescendos and feels really, really, really yucky, but if we could let it dissipate. And that's, I will say, it's hard stuff, but it's big stuff. Because if we can experience and see and trust and learn that we can ride the wave of a yucky frustration, and that we actually get through it, that our body, it dissipates, it's big, big stuff to move forward with.
Gosh, you're talking about this, and I told you before we started that I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old, and all I can think back is like, I wish that when they were 2 and 3, that I would have known some of this stuff, or I would have thought about it, to allow them to feel that moment of joy, to train them, to pause. Um, you can't work backwards, but I just think it's really important. I mean, you don't even think about, you think, when we were talking, of course, I was going towards the negative, scary, uncomfortable emotions, but even those moments of joy, we should be appreciating and not numbing or not dismissing, because I think we also, many of us will do that as well, instead of fully experiencing it, because big emotions aren't something that this society is welcoming to.
Right. No, our society wants to manage and regulate emotions and keep them in check. Those are the words that we use. And I understand those words, right? We have to be able to manage and regulate our emotions in order to live in the world, right? And
Right.
to have societal norms and expect to live up to the societal expectations. But as a result, we don't let ourselves take in those really, wonderful moments. In the book, I talk about sort of a fantasy emotions class for young kids, right? So that we, in a class, you could talk about like all the different emotions, the ones that feel good and the ones that don't feel good. We can practice, feeling them. We can acknowledge that maybe we feel them in our body, and we can practice sitting with them, and we can, talk about them and share them and cheer our friends on, when they feel something and get to the other side of a feeling. And, if you could imagine if we had that as young kids, I think we'd be different. We'd be different folks. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And pulling ourselves away from the distractions more often. I mean, when my kids were young, we were raising them on baby Einstein, and starting them out early on how to distract, how to calm and soothe, instead of allowing them to self-soothe. I actually, gosh, I didn't think of this until just now. I mean, I remember my kids both, one sucked his thumb and one sucked their finger. And, the big thing from a lot of people was, well, you need to stop that behavior. You need to pull the pacifier, clip the pacifier. And I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept thinking, this is self-soothing. They need to work through it. They'll, I've never seen a 12-year-old, sucking his thumb. And, that's kind of the most basic of ways of helping to recognize it, that something's going on that's uncomfortable in my body. Is that a numbing? Is self-soothing numbing? Or I told you, I sometimes go off on tangents, and here we go.
No. It's a great question. And I think soothing, excuse me, is really important. Again, I think that self-soothing, when when it comes to a point of sort of the that you can't do something without it, then maybe that's a situation where it's become something that you're too dependent on? I don't know. I think it's an incredible question to ask, because we do need, the sort of thing that we give our kids. What is it that we give them? Trophies,
Mhm.
everybody a trophy, right? Like
Right, right.
figuratively and literally. We do need to let our kids feel their hard feelings. And, one of the things that I'll say, and listen, I do not say I'm not a perfect parent by any means, but I will say to my kids when they're struggling is that it's okay. Like feeling this way, feeling yucky, feeling anxious and stressed. And that is like totally normal and valid. And I know you can I know you can handle hard things. Like, and I want them to know that they can handle hard things. I think that's probably one thing that that I hope my kids will learn and take with them, is to know that they can handle hard feelings and they can handle hard things. And of course, we all distracted, numb, and to
Sure.
some degree, of course.
Yeah. Well,
But
because of,
just if we have a little bit of trust that we can do that, I think it goes a long way.
can you tell me a little bit? I've heard briefly about somatic therapy.
Mhm.
How is that same, different than what you do? And does it complement?
Yeah. So somatic therapies, and there's many different somatic therapies,
Okay.
but they're all along the lines of sort of seeing the body as a window to something deeper, to a deeper self awareness, to a deeper self understanding and self transformation. And somatic work looks at, it experiences the inner experience of the body. My work has focused on emotions, like the inner experience of emotions, but I will say that I blur the lines with that, because the work that I do, I really try to invite people to have a vocabulary and to express and experience anything that they're feeling in their body. And so, if somebody I have patients that see colors in their body. I have people that experience memories, right? Or images or music, even.
Hmm.
That may or may not be an emotion, but it is something generated from within, and it's an inner experience that is real and in the present moment for somebody. And that, in my opinion, and in somatic therapies, should have a voice, should have an expression. You should be
Mhm.
able to feel that. Um, I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I really wonder if I don't feel a doggone thing. I mean, I feel like I've got big emotions and such, but you're talking about people that can like express in color and in music. I mean,
Mhm.
it's always so fascinating to me how different
Yeah.
individuals are, and that somebody would identify a color to a part of their body or a feeling in their body is incredible to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a little jealous, right? Like, I would be,
It is really cool. It is really cool. But what I would say is that I shouldn't say but the work that I do and the collaboration that I have with my patients is we create an opportunity. We create the space for these feelings to exist and to really explore them. And so not all of us have had that opportunity, right? Not all of us have that consciousness.
right.
And that's sort of part of my goal in writing this book, is to, and to explore, and I write about what my rejection feels like in my body, right? It's a way to help people realize that, oh, like there could be a whole world in there that I would want to explore. Yeah.
With that being said, because some of us aren't as in tune,
Hmm.
let's take maybe the top three emotions. Let's take anxiety out of it, because I think everybody knows, butterflies in the stomach. But let's take, maybe shame,
Hmm.
guilt, maybe just shame and guilt, or
Hmm.
maybe shame, guilt, and joy. I don't care.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but what are common ways that you're hearing from your patients that
Hmm.
this does show up in the body? It may not show up
the same way for everybody, clearly,
Right.
because I don't see colors, which makes
Mhm.
me sad. But what are some common ways that people are talking about those and how they're showing up in the body?
Yeah. So I prescribe to the idea too, also that everybody is going to feel something different in their body. So if we're going to look at shame, for example, people may feel that anywhere, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the ways that in my patients, how that has come up is there'll be a feeling of either numbness in their body, right? Or I some people will feel like an even like an I guess that's a numbness, an absence of sensation, maybe a tension, maybe a gripping, right? And when we explore and feel that feeling, somebody might be able to attach it to a experience, or might be able to be aware that this feeling is familiar. That's a big one in the work that I do, is that somebody may recognize they'll be feeling something and they realize I've felt this at various times in my life, right? So this is a feeling that's familiar to me. And then if we go a little deeper, they might be able to connect it with an experience. And like I said, I work with present moment, right? So somebody who is feeling, usually when we connect in my work, when we connect emotions with a feeling, it's because somebody has come in experiencing something and we can connect some dots, right? So like this happened, and this feeling was generated in my body, and I've felt this feeling before, and I I don't know if that makes sense, but it's yeah.
I think it does, is that they're feeling there is a feeling, whatever that
Mhm.
feeling is, whether it's
Mhm.
uncomfortableness or not.
Mhm.
Um, and they can't understand maybe why they're feeling this.
Mhm.
And then, but it's a present moment feeling.
Yeah.
And you help tie it back to where was that? Where, when have you felt this in the
Yeah.
past?
Yeah. I had a patient, and I write about it a little bit in the book, who came to me one day just like spiraling and restless and anxious, and she was, she basically said to me, I'm sitting in your waiting room, Jen, scrolling through Facebook, and I see three of my very best friends in New York City without me, right? And we were able to get on the table and just explore that experience. And she knew, just by verbalizing it and telling me, she had already connected the dots. It didn't change the feeling. She was still spiraling. But when she explored the feeling and actually like stayed with it a little while, this yucky feeling of rejection in her body, she was able to stay with it long enough for it to pass. And that again just helps us. It's big stuff, because we don't always have to go run away from a feeling and distract ourselves.
So when you're talking about outlasting a feeling or sitting with the feeling,
Mhm.
are you also asking to explore that feeling or to talk yourself, I don't want to say out of it, but to rationalize the feeling? Are you saying just sit with it, let it percolate?
Yeah, I am, and I'm really glad that you make that distinction, because we can make connections, and our tendency is to want to connect the dots with narratives and stories and explanations, and that's great, and I'm not dismissing that. It's important to do that. But when I'm talking about sitting with a feeling and outlasting, I really encourage people to sort of throw the narrative and the attachment to any kind of, words and stories and meaning, to let that go. Because in order to really stay with a feeling, it's a pre-verbal, nonverbal experience in the body, and that's what's going to pass. That's what's going to crescendo in the body and dissipate. Then sadly, the narrative and the stories are there.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of stick around a
Yeah.
lot, right?
Takes a lot of discipline not to
Takes
listen
a
to you.
Exactly, exactly. But the body is really a present moment. I mean, things are happening and it's moving through us and we're experiencing it, and it runs its course.
So where can people find your book? And I know I do this a lot. I ask two questions in one, but where can people find your book? And then if they think that they need more, are there places that people that maybe don't live in the Northeast could find someone like you? Is there a place that you could direct them to say, hey, you know what? This might be helpful for you.
Well, okay, so let me address that first because it is challenging. Um, there are body workers that exist. There isn't one particular technique that I feel like I can just say. I feel like that would be irresponsible. Right. But for if somebody is interested in somatic work, there are a lot of folks out there, and you can do research online and type in, somatic body work or somatic psychotherapy. I mean, there are psychotherapists that do indeed bring the body into the conversation. And so there are lots of folks out there. They just, you just need to find somebody in your area. It's not as what I'm talking about. The feelings piece and outlasting the feelings is something that it's the lens that I work through. It's the lens that I write through. But there are many opportunities for people to explore what their present moment experience is. I mean, mindfulness. Yeah. Mindfulness meditation, mindfulness retreats, mindfulness groups. These are all places where we can explore our inner experience, our present moment experience without judgment, criticism, in like an open, compassionate, neutral way.
And then you just add on, let's use some of those tools to help us with the feelings or the felt emotions that we've got.
Yeah, right. So the work, and a lot of that is because I have specialized in mental health. I have a group of therapists and psychologists that refer clients and patients to me, and so I've realized that avoiding hard feelings, avoiding this and distracting and living in sort of a more unconscious, mindless way is contributing to, our mental health and our well-being. And so that's where I've sort of taken it into this realm of felt emotion.
So again, what's the name of your book and where can people find it?
So the name of my book again is The Feeling Muscle. And right now it's available on Amazon as a paperback and an ebook. It's also available in local bookstores and big bookstores, but it has to be special ordered, which can easily happen. And I'm in the process of getting the ebook on a few other platforms. So depending when someone listens to this, it might be available. And then an audiobook is in the works for, I'm hoping, February, March.
I've heard the audiobook process is something you have to sit with, is an emotion you have to sit with.
Yeah. And I made the decision for, I don't know if it was a good decision or a poor decision, but I made the decision to read it myself because I feel really strongly about the words that I wrote. And yeah. And so that's been even crazier to do it myself. So yeah,
I heard it's a big undertaking. So, well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your background. And I know this will resonate. Thank you.
Well, and I just want to, may I just say thank you so much for having me, and just thank you for the community that you have created here. I'm just super grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you're feeling a little lighter, a little brighter, and ready to take on whatever comes next. Remember, the journey of mental health is all about progress, not perfection. So keep climbing. And don't forget to celebrate the small wins. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little lift.